Need a beacon for your scene? Well, look no further. This one's quite straightforward, very simple, very basic. A couple of geometry nodes, a couple of shader nodes, and off you go. So today we're going to be looking at these beacons. We're going to be building them using geometry nodes and some clever shader nodes. And we're going to be talking about how to make them unique for your own scene. Okay, so to create this beacon, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a fresh session. And instead of deleting the default cube, let's go straight into geometry nodes, click new, and get rid of this geometry input. And we want to replace that with a cylinder. So mesh primitives, let's just call it cylinder. There we go. Straight in there like that. So straight away we've got this cylinder going on, and it doesn't look too bad. I think the sizes it straight away are pretty good, but if you wanted to, of course, you can always vary the radius and the depth. And what we're going to do is create a beacon, and we're going to have a mesh around it. So we kind of want the mesh to look about right. We want it to have the kind of chain, cagey look around it. So what we're going to do is probably make it a little less refined. 17 worked on my previous model. And then we want to put these in here. So you can see straight away we're going to start to get this mesh around. And we'll have fill segments, so that puts in the top. And we're going to make that one 4. So straight away you've got this going on. And that looks, it doesn't look too bad for a beacon. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have 2 of these essentially. We're going to have an inner and an outer. So the inner is going to be kind of your glassy section with the light in it, and the outer is going to be the actual chain. So we need to split these off slightly. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say join geometry. I'm going to put that down there. So one length going in is going to be this inner. And then what we're going to do is we're going to scale out another geometry. In fact, let's do this here so you can see it straight away. Okay, so that says 1, but if I was to do that, you can see we've actually got 2 in there. So let's make this kind of small. I only want 1%, let's say. So let's put that back onto there. Let's just do that. Let's do that so we can see it. And what we want to do now is to, because at the moment these are just lines, so we actually want to give them a bit of depth. So mesh to curve. Curve to mesh. And what I'm essentially doing there is taking this mesh, converting it into curves, and then converting it back again into mesh. So it's kind of wipes out these middle sections. It only really focuses on these vertices here. So I want to give the vertex a bit of a size. So it's circle, if I can spell, curve, circle, curve. Drop that in there, and we'll plug that into the profile. And straight away it goes absolutely crazy. That's because it's set to 1 meter. Make this 0.1, suddenly you can start seeing that there's a bit more going on there. Resolution doesn't need to be that high. You can make it 10. The less going on, the easier it is for the computer to handle. So let's turn that off, and you can see there that we're starting to get our kind of beacony look, which looks kind of cool. It's starting to take shape. So now we want to do is set some materials. Oops, I only want the one material. And do another one here. So what this does is it assigns a material to your inner portion and then to your outer grill. Okay, so yeah, it's looking pretty good so far. And let's quickly put a base on this as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to derive another cylinder. Let's put it down here, and let's join this straight up to here. Could really do with a line instead of going through things, goes nice and up. And then let's say we want to make another one. We want to make it a little bit wider than what we currently have. We currently have it at 1 meter. Doesn't need to be 1 meter. Make any size you like. So this is going to sit at the bottom of our lamp here. But as you can see straight away, it's actually in the wrong place. So what we want to do is we want to move it. So we're going to go transform, plug it straight in. So it's geometry. And we want to move it in the Z direction. And by simply doing that, you can move it up and down, and that works quite nicely. You can spend as ever long as you like messing around with it. So at the moment, this doesn't look too great. It looks a bit too flat. So let's extrude it a little bit and add a bit of shape to this. Okay, so we don't want to do it on all faces. We only want to do it on the top face. So if you go top, there you go. Offset scale, and you can drag that up and down to your heart's content. And it looks starting to look pretty good, but we want to adjust the size of this top section. So we put the scale in there as well, and then you can start to do that with it. There's bound to be hundreds of ways of doing this. This is kind of the quick way that I use, and there's bound to be like bevel or a special selection method on here. Alternatively, you could have, instead of just having it as one beacon, you could have it as two sections and just mesh whatever you want to. But this just keeps it nice in here as a beacon. I can never keep caps lock on. Or when I do want to have caps lock off, I typically have caps lock on, and I end up writing reams and reams of paragraphs with my caps lock on, which is really annoying. Okay, there we go. Set material, plug that into there. So now we've got our three sections, and the beauty of this is it's non-committal. You can change this however much you want. I'm just going to muck around with this for a second or two. That's too big. Always take into account the depth of this. It's 1.5 meters. You know the size of that. So let's change that 1.4. So it's just a little bit of overhang. So there you go. That is your basic beacon. Very simple, quick and easy. Not a problem at all. And all we now have to do is assign some material. So let's just very quickly the render image. And there you go. That's how it looks. You can crank that up a little bit on your side segments there. Ooh, that's going a bit crazy. And let's just see what that does. So just by cranking up the settings, of course, there are other things you can do. You could shade smooth. You could use any other nodes you want to kind of adjust this. You can bevel that as much as you like, and scale it out, extrude it. You can do all sorts with this, but this is your basic shape. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to shading. Now we're going to go straight to come out here and shading. Oops. Zoom in here, and we're going to call this first material. Let's call it the beacon. Let's go for the beacon itself. The rest of it is going to be really straightforward. Just zoom that up so we can actually see what we're doing. So we'll just wipe out, start off with a very basic, just our material input. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a mix shader. Let's plug this in. Just do the one. We'll do one section, and then you'll see how we can very quickly apply this and get the full beacon effect. But let's go through one bit at a time. Emission into that one there, and let's just give this straight away a very ready look. And yeah, let's do glass. So actually, whilst this is doing, what I should have done was very quickly assign beacon to there. Shading, go back to shading, if it'll let me. You can see what we're doing. Straight away, I want to crank that up to 50. It's got a bit of light. So now I want to tell this factor what to do. Now to get our effect, we just want to go gradient, texture. So we don't want to all the way through. plug the color in there. And then we go Control T. Make sure you got your Node Wrangler on. Otherwise you need to find these independently. But as soon as your Node Wrangler is on for your edit, your preferences, Control T, and it just appears. So straight away we want to switch from linear to radial. And you can see there, oh look, that's quite interesting. You can see how that's working. So now we want to put a bit more control in this. And I want to go Control A, color ramp. Okay, it's starting to get a bit blocked up. The way I do this one now is we go, let's add 2 more points. Make that 1 point, 5, call it. 4, 5. This will all make sense in just a moment. 0.4 and 0.6. So you can see there what's going on. We've adjusted these figures and you can see it's starting to cut out a big slot of the texture. So we want to crank that up to 1. We want to crank that, put it back, down to 0. Crank this one down to 0. And you want to crank that one. That one should be at 1. Yes, it is. It is at 1. So again, that's looking pretty good. We're in EV. Let's put some bloom on this. In fact, if we switch over to cycles, make sure your GPU is on. There you go, looking pretty good already. So let's quickly denoise that. Crank these down. These do not need to be this high. You can muck around with these numbers later. So you can see there straight away you've got your kind of beacony look. Not looking too bad at all. Let's muck around with the numbers and just play around with it until it looks, until you're quite happy with it. And what I typically do on mine is I drop these down a little bit, so a little bit darker. Just muck with the numbers until you're happy. Now, we've done one segment there. You can see straight away that obviously we want to duplicate these out, but it's important if you want to play with this to do one side first and just get it the way you want. That, to me, doesn't look too bad, but you can obviously play around with that so that you can make that go this way, you can make that go that way. Give it a bit of variation. What you can suggest is if that was right into there, so it's a very thin line, you could say that the rotation is that away, and this is kind of a beam behind it. Or you can, as I say, you can do anything you like to it. So you muck around with one. As soon as you are happy, you copy a duplicate, if it lets me, and just create another. And then what you say is you add a shader, you slam it right in the middle. Doesn't really matter which slot it goes into. That's 2. Going about Z, so you can say Z 180. And straight away you've got 2 then. So that's starting to look pretty good. And I think we'll keep this as is, and we just need to remember that we're rotating that away when we do our animations. But it doesn't quite look right yet. You've still got this big. So that's how it's starting to look. And you can see there that we've got this missing bit in the middle. So we need to sort that bit out. So let's do that now. Okay. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to, let's disconnect this in its entirety and work on it by itself. And what we want to do is do an emission. plug that into there. In fact, what I should have done really is just copy this one. But what I'll do is I'll copy the hex code because we want it to be the same red. So it's like that. It's looking good. You can see there, all it's done really is just illuminate this. So we want to muck around with it and only tell it to work on that central bit. So gradient again. Into the strength. Control T, remember, no Wrangler on. Set it to object. Straight away, right there. So we want to pick the right one. So we're going to go to spherical. See that it's kind of done with it. Let's make that 0. And we're going to make that 1.5. You can see there that all we've done is we've started to adjust the scaling. So 0 just drags it right into the middle. And then these functions here can make this wider or smaller to your contain. You could actually muck with these independently and make it like elliptical if you wanted. So what we want to do now is, because it's so dull, we want to increase the strength of this. And to do that, we're going to switch to a math node, hit multiply, and you can now crank that up. Let's contain, let's make that 500 so it's really bright. And obviously now we've got, it's almost too bright, it's almost too edgy. So again, you can adjust this with a color ramp. Plug it into there, and what we do is we can just adjust these. I find that having B-spline on in this case works best. Vary it like that. So now we want to bring all these together. So add shader, crank that in the middle. Plug that one into there, and there you go. That's not looking, it's not looking too bad at all. And what you can do to take it a little bit further, because we're in cycles, you can even crack that into the volume. That should give you a bit of a glow in the middle. You can say like that. Okay. So that's your very basic beacon. And of course you can play around with these values. Just remember, if you are going to do that, it's best to play with one of these, and if then delete the opposing color ramp and just copy and paste it straight in. We can actually make this a bit easier, a bit more slick by having exactly the same shaders in there. So whoops, I didn't undo that. Undo. Delete that emission. Delete that glass. So now it's synchronous. You could do whatever you like with it. You don't have to have the same one going in. You could have a different color there. You could have a different color there. You could have any different kinds of combinations you see fit. But now we've got the situation where we've got our beacon, and what we want to do is add a bit of rotation. So if I go over here to timeline editor, I'll make it as 0, and we'll say insert keyframe, insert keyframe, and over to 250, and let's just say you want to make it go around in circles, let's say 5 times in that 10-second period. So it's 360 times 5, insert keyframe. Now because we've offset this by 180, you say plus 360 times 5, insert keyframe. Let's just switch that into that one so it runs a bit quicker. Now if you hit the go button, that's looking pretty good. But you probably will notice straight away, yeah, you go, it's accelerated and decelerated. If you want this as an animation that's going to continually go forward, you need to go into, should really have done this at the start, but you can adjust your defaults. So in topulation mode, you want to switch to linear. Just make sure it's linear throughout. Make sure you've got your item selected, your mapping selected. You go to this one, and you say linear again. Of course, you can do this in your defaults. You don't have to do it here. So let's see what that does now. Let's just make sure that behaves a bit more. There we go. And because we started at 0 and it's going to 250, it should be seamless. So that's looking pretty good. Obviously, if I go to this one here, we're going to be testing the GPU a little bit. But that is your very basic beacon. And obviously, we'll fill this out with more detail. And we'll do that now. We'll just call it wire. Just give a very basic. Here we go, wire, and let's you know what? Let's do the same for the top and the bottom, just to make our lives a little bit easier. And there you go. That's looking pretty good. Obviously, you can spend whatever amount of time on this you like, just to kind of give it that edgy look. Yeah, I'm actually quite happy with that. Okay, starting to look pretty good. Let's see, I'm going to go background and darken this off. Try that again. Image. Cool. And that is your basic beacon. Let's make it a bit lighter. There we go. So that's the general principle behind these beacons. They're very straightforward, very simple to build. So going left to right here, so we start off with our very basic beacon that we've just built together. I've added a bit more shading to kind of give it a kind of chromy metallic look. Then we go to our middle, our blue beacon here, which has a bit more. Has a blue in it, and what I've done there is I've stretched out the beam so to give it a bit more of a realistic look. Then we've got our green beacon, where what I've done there, as you can see, we've gone from 2 to 3 beams, and that was quite straightforward. Instead of going 180, you have a 120 degree on your mapping, and instead of just 2, you have a third beam. And it's just really adding more nodes. So you can add as many as you like. And then finally, why stick with a simple cylinder beam? You can drop in a different native material mesh. Instead of a cylinder, you can just go straight for a UV sphere, which I've done here. So you can mix up your shapes, you can mix up your designs, and mix up your colors. You've got a lot of flexibility with this approach, and it does look, in the end, it does look really, really very good. So there we have it. We have our beacons, and here's an example of just dropping it into a scene. This is a sci-fi corridor that I made earlier. Very effective. Got a bit of volume density going on in here. It's going to give it that weird kind of misty look. But yeah, and if you make your own beacons, please let me know. I hope you found this video useful. And if there are any comments, please feel free to jump in, and I'll see if I can answer them. Thank you very much for getting this far, and we'll see you next time.